I never thought my biggest fight would come from the neighborhood I tried so hard to avoid. Willow Creek was the kind of place where time stood still. 40 acres of rolling hills, a battered red barn older than my grandfather, and a handful of donkeys who were more family than livestock. I kept to myself, paid my taxes, and politely declined every HOA invitation that found its way to my battered mailbox. The homeowners association didn't really have authority over my land. The paperwork was clear on that, but that didn't stop them from trying to include me whenever it suited their needs. For years, it was harmless enough. Until Karen McIntyre showed up. Karen was everything people whispered about behind tight smiles, bossy, tireless, and convinced she alone understood what the community needed. In just 6 months, she'd transformed the HOA from a sleepy committee into a bureaucratic battering ram. She handed out citations for unmowed grass, color-coordinated trash bins, and even demanded one neighbor replace her perfectly fine mailbox because it was visually disruptive. I knew my time was coming. My barn, despite its historical charm, didn't fit Karen's polished vision of suburban perfection. The first letter came tucked under my door. Dear property owner, your barn presents an aesthetic challenge to Willow Creek's standards of excellence. Kindly attend to necessary updates. I crumpled it without reading further. Then came the fines. Notices of community violations demanding payment for imaginary infractions, excessive animal noise, non-compliant fencing, unauthorized agricultural structures. All nonsense and all ignored. I figured ignoring her would make her lose interest. I underestimated Karen's hunger for control. The ambush came on a warm Saturday afternoon. I was coming back from the feed store, my truck bed loaded with grain and fresh hay, when I noticed something odd. Rows of gleaming SUVs and minivans lined my dirt driveway like a parade. Past the old oak tree, I could see people milling around my barn, balloons bobbing on every post, folding tables unfolding like an invading army. I rolled to a stop, heart sinking.
No.
Not here. Not today. Karen spotted me and marched over, armed with her signature clipboard and a blinding smile. She wore a pastel sundress and a wide-brimmed hat like some sort of discount Southern belle. Surprise, she trilled. We're hosting the Willow Creek Spring Picnic, and your lovely barn is our venue. She said it like she was announcing I'd won a contest. I stared at her, struggling to find words. This is private property, I said, voice low but firm. You can't just... Karen waved a manicured hand, cutting me off as if I were some petulant child. Oh, don't be like that. You're part of our community, and we're celebrating all of Willow Creek. Your barn adds such rustic charm. Behind her, toddlers shrieked as they chased one of my donkeys around the corral. Someone was dragging a grill across the barn's threshold. Plastic tablecloths flapped in the breeze like surrender flags. I felt anger boil inside me, but I kept it corked.
You didn't ask.
You didn't even warn me. Karen tilted her head in mock confusion. But surely you want to support the neighborhood spirit. It's just one afternoon. Don't be difficult. I clenched my fists at my sides. There were trespassers on my land, animals getting stressed, liability disasters waiting to happen, and she dared call me difficult. It was the arrogance that did it. The unshakable belief that my home, my history, my rights, were just minor inconveniences for her grand vision. I swallowed hard and gave her a smile, so thin it could slice glass. You're right, I said softly. Today is a special day. Karen beamed, mistaking my meaning. I checked my watch. Right on schedule. Today wasn't just any day on the farm. Today was Donkey Vaccination Day, an annual event that involved sedation, needles, and a whole lot of unpredictable donkey behavior. I looked past Karen at the crowd, parents setting out deviled eggs, kids tugging at my feed buckets, a trio of teenagers trying to mount the fence. They had no idea what was coming, and I had no intention of stopping it. I leaned against the tailgate of my truck, arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold with grim satisfaction. The donkeys, normally easygoing, had picked up on the strange energy crackling through the barnyard. Their ears were pinned flat, their tails twitching. Across the pasture, Doc Wilkins arrived right on time, his battered veterinary truck rattling down the dirt lane. Dust clouded around his tires. From his open window, he shot me a puzzled glance at the sight of dozens of strangers cavorting around the barn. I gave him a slight nod. He understood immediately. Pulling up beside me, Doc cut the engine and swung down from the cab. He was a wiry man in his 60s, with sun-leathered skin and sharp, knowing eyes. He carried 2 large coolers packed with vaccines, syringes, and tranquilizer darts. "You weren't kidding when you said you had a crowd this year," he muttered, lips twitching. "They invited themselves," I said. Doc looked over the scene. Karen perched at a picnic table like a queen surveying her kingdom, kids weaving between donkey hooves, and barbecue smoke curling from my barn door. "This gonna be a problem?" "Not for us." Doc gave a soft chuckle. "All right then, let's get started." We set up the mobile pen by the side of the barn. Normally, vaccinations were a simple affair. A corral, a few calm donkeys, a few pokes, done by noon. But with adrenaline buzzing through the animals and a crowd inches away, it was a different beast entirely. I called over to Karen, who was busy arranging cupcakes on a 3-tiered stand. "You might want to move your guests," I said, loud enough to carry over the music blasting from a Bluetooth speaker. She frowned. "Why?" "We're about to start livestock medical procedures. You're in the splash zone." Karen laughed, an irritating, dismissive trill. "Oh, don't be dramatic.
They're just donkeys."
As if on cue, Elvis, the largest of my herd and a notorious troublemaker, brayed loudly enough to rattle the rafters. Several children shrieked in delight and chased toward him, waving sticky fists full of candy. Doc shook his head. "Your funeral, lady." He drew the first tranquilizer from his cooler, the thick needle glinting under the sun. I slipped a halter over Elvis's head, tightening it carefully. The big donkey balked and tried to pull away, hooves kicking up dust. The sudden motion spooked the others, and in seconds the entire herd was snorting, braying, and skittering into one another like a schoolyard brawl. The guests started noticing. "What's wrong with the donkeys?" a woman asked, nervously clutching her toddler to her hip. "They seem wild," Karen muttered, brow pinching. I didn't answer. I was too busy leading Elvis into the pen, where Doc waited, syringe poised. As soon as Doc stuck him, Elvis let out a gut-deep bellow and bucked backward, ripping free of the halter. He charged through the flimsy fence and barreled straight toward the picnic tables. Screams erupted. Plastic chairs flew. Potato salad launched into the air like confetti. Grown adults scrambled over each other, trying to dodge the frantic donkey stampede that followed. The donkeys, half sedated and fully panicked, trampled the buffet. One particularly determined beast dove headfirst into the cupcake tower, sending a rain of frosting and sprinkles across Karen's designer sundress.
Chaos.
Beautiful, poetic chaos. Karen shrieked, flapping her arms as if that could protect her from the onslaught. Elvis, unimpressed, snorted and sprayed a fine mist of donkey snot across her pristine hat before trotting toward the pasture. Doc leaned against the truck, laughing so hard he had to wipe tears from his eyes. "That's a first," he wheezed. Cupcake demolition by donkey. I didn't bother hiding my grin. I waded through the carnage toward Karen, who was furiously scrubbing frosting off her designer bag with a napkin. "This is your fault," she screeched, eyes wild. "You let this happen." I shrugged. "Told you. Private property. Veterinary procedures. Splash zone." But, you should have canceled," she sputtered. "You should have asked." Karen's mouth flapped uselessly. Around her, guests were gathering their children, their folding chairs, their dignity, whatever hadn't been smeared into the dirt, and beating a hasty retreat. The barnyard emptied as fast as it had filled, leaving behind trampled grass, shredded decorations, and a few forlorn hot dogs smoldering in the grass. Doc ambled up beside me, still chuckling. "Well," he said, surveying the wreckage, "I'd call that a successful inoculation for the donkeys, at least." I clapped him on the back. "And a necessary one for the HOA." Karen stood alone in the center of the ruins, clutching her sticky, ruined picnic basket like a sinking ship's last lifeboat. It was the first time I'd ever seen her without words.
But I knew this wasn't the end.
Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. Something told me she'd be back, with reinforcements. And next time, I'd be ready. By Monday morning, the letter was already in my mailbox. I found it tucked between a seed catalog and a hardware store flyer, an official HOA envelope, crisp and smug. I opened it on the porch with a cup of black coffee in hand, expecting the usual passive-aggressive nonsense. But even I wasn't prepared for this. Dear property owner, due to your reckless endangerment of Willow Creek residents during an unsanctioned veterinary procedure, the Homeowners Association hereby places you on probationary review. A formal hearing will determine whether your privileges, including community access and property rights, will be suspended or revoked. I laughed aloud, startling the blue jays on the fence post. Suspend my property rights? Over a picnic? On land the HOA didn't even legally control? Karen had lost her mind. But as the day wore on, the absurdity began to curdle into anger. Karen wasn't just throwing tantrums anymore, she was rallying the neighborhood against me. The signs popped up overnight. Protect Willow Creek, say no to unsafe farms. Keep our neighborhood clean and safe. Yard after yard, the same message, all with Karen's fingerprints on them. By Wednesday, a community safety task force had materialized, four middle-aged men in matching polos and clipboards, snooping around the edge of my property, jotting down imaginary infractions. I caught one of them photographing my manure pile and waved cheerfully from the porch, making sure my shotgun was visible leaning against the railing. He stumbled backwards so fast he dropped his clipboard. It would have been funny if it weren't so personal. Karen wasn't just trying to humiliate me, she was trying to erase me. That's when I knew ignoring her wouldn't work. Petty wars need bold responses. It was time to fight back. I started small. First, I called the county zoning office and confirmed, again, that my land was outside HOA jurisdiction. Just for good measure, I requested updated copies of the original development plats and survey maps. Then I called my cousin Joni, a paralegal with a sharp tongue and an encyclopedic knowledge of property law. By Friday, my mailbox was stuffed with paperwork, all confirming the same thing. Karen's crusade had no legal leg to stand on. Her hearings were about as binding as a kid's lemonade stand rules. But facts alone wouldn't stop her. Karen thrived on spectacle. She needed a public reckoning. Fortunately, the perfect opportunity was just around the corner, the annual Willow Creek HOA meeting. A required gathering. Open mic public minutes. And this year, scheduled at, where else, the Willow Creek Community Pavilion right down the road from my farm. I spent the next few days preparing my arsenal. When the evening of the meeting arrived, I rolled up in my mud-splattered truck, parking neatly between a BMW and a Tesla. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. Karen stood at the entrance, clipboard clutched so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her expression curdled when she saw me saunter up, tipping my hat politely. "Evening," I said. She sniffed, turning away without a word. Inside, the pavilion buzzed with tension. Rows of folding chairs faced a podium draped in patriotic bunting. A table near the front displayed HOA newsletters, budget reports, and, tastelessly, a petition titled, "Petition to Revoke the Agricultural Exception for Lot Number 47. My lot. Karen took the stage, tapping the microphone. "Good evening, Willow Creek," she chirped. "Tonight, we address an important threat to the health and harmony of our beloved community." Her speech dripped with self-righteousness, painting my donkey vaccination day as a near catastrophe, an unforgivable act of rural barbarism. She finished with a theatrical flourish, brandishing the petition. "I move that we vote tonight to demand compliance, or consequences." Applause rippled through her loyalists.
I rose slowly from my seat.
The room hushed. I walked to the microphone, boots heavy on the wooden floor. "Name's Cole McAllister," I said. "Owner of Lot Number 47. Caretaker of Willow Creek's original farmstead, dating back to 1892. I let that sink in. You all know me. You've driven past my barn, waved at my donkeys, bought my pumpkins come fall. Some of you even bring your grandkids by to feed them carrots. A few heads nodded reluctantly. I lifted a thick folder and dropped it onto the podium with a satisfying thud. This, I said, is every legal document confirming my land's independence from HOA governance.
Filed.
Verified. Recorded with the county. I opened the top page. And this, I continued, voice steady, is my formal cease and desist against the HOA for harassment, trespassing, and defamation. A murmur spread. Karen's smile froze into something brittle and hollow. I leaned in slightly. Anyone setting foot on my property without permission will be prosecuted. Anyone spreading lies about my farm will be sued. I straightened up, scanning the room. I have no desire for bad blood. I want to be left in peace. But if you force me to defend what's mine, I will. Silence blanketed the pavilion. Even Karen, for once, had no comeback. I stepped back from the microphone, heart pounding but face calm. This war wasn't over. But tonight, I'd won the first real battle. The next few days after the meeting were quieter than they'd been in months. The picket signs disappeared from front yards overnight, like a bad dream finally lifting. Even the Community Safety Task Force disbanded without a word, clipboards quietly tucked away, matching polos abandoned. I couldn't blame them. Karen's crusade had collapsed the moment facts hit the light. But Karen herself? She wasn't the type to go down gracefully. I spotted her several times over the next week, storming from house to house, trying to whip up fresh outrage. Yet everywhere she went, doors seemed to close just a little quicker, conversations a little shorter. The neighborhood had lost its appetite for drama, especially when word got out about the lawsuit. I hadn't even had to file it yet. Just the threat, the stack of paperwork I left in plain view at the meeting, had done the heavy lifting. Nobody wanted to get dragged into a real courtroom, least of all over something as ridiculous as a donkey vaccination. Karen was on an island now, and she knew it. Still, she wasn't quite done. The final straw came 2 Saturdays later. I woke up early to check fences and water troughs before the heat climbed, and as I rounded the barn, there she was, Karen, in all her furious glory, standing just inside my property line, screaming into her phone. She hadn't seen me yet. I crouched behind a hay bale and listened. Yes, officer, he's operating an unlicensed veterinary clinic. Dangerous animals, disease hazards, absolutely out of compliance with community standards. No, I don't care what his paperwork says. Someone needs to shut him down. I stood up slowly, boots crunching on gravel. Karen whirled around, face draining of color. "You're trespassing," I said, voice low. She clicked off the call in a panic, stuffing the phone into her pocket. I was just calling the sheriff on a lawful farm doing lawful work. I finished for her. Again. For a long second, we just stared at each other. No birdsong. No distant car engines. Just the buzz of tension hanging thick in the summer air. "You don't belong here," she hissed finally. "You and your filthy animals." I smiled thinly. "You should leave," I said.
Now.
"Before you add criminal trespassing to your resume." Something in my voice must have convinced her. She backed away, lips pressed tight, and half-jogged toward the road where her shiny white SUV waited. I didn't stop her. Instead, I called Deputy Ramirez, a good man who'd bought his Christmas trees for me 3 years running, and gave him the rundown. By sunset, Karen had a formal trespass warning filed against her name, delivered neatly to her front door. The message was clear. One more step onto my land, and she'd be seeing the inside of a courtroom for real. The neighborhood let out a collective sigh of relief. Within a week, Karen's house sported a bright red for sale sign. No farewell parties. No goodbye potlucks. Just the slow, awkward migration of cardboard boxes and furniture into a rented moving truck. On the day she left, I happened to be out by the mailbox. She glanced at me once, face tight with bitterness, then dropped her gaze and slammed her car door shut. I tipped my hat anyway. Not out of politeness. Out of triumph. Some battles you win with fists. Others with patience and a little paperwork. As the moving truck rumbled away, the air seemed to lighten. Kids' laughter returned to the streets. Folks who'd once looked the other way started waving again when they passed my farm. By fall, the HOA board held a special meeting. They passed a new policy. No HOA actions against properties outside official jurisdiction. No harassment of independent landowners. No community safety task forces without explicit county approval. It was a small thing, but it meant everything. The farm thrived. The donkeys thrived. And I finally could breathe easy. Sometimes, when I'm out fixing fences or mending the old barn roof, I think about that absurd day, Karen and her ridiculous picnic among the donkeys, flailing and shrieking, the chaos of it all. And I smile. In the end, Karen thought she could bulldoze her way through anything, through rules, through neighbors, through reality itself. But Willow Creek had been here long before she arrived. And it would be here long after she was just a bitter memory in the rearview mirror. The land has a way of choosing who belongs. And this time, it chose right.